When you go on social media, you see people spending like £4,000 monthly maintenance, and it's just not realistic.
Today, I have Mia on the podcast, and she is the founder of Frugal Chic. And she has created a platform teaching people how to be smarter with their money, how to invest, and how to live a luxury life on a budget. Do you think we're living in an era of overconsumption?
Obviously, we all have control of what we buy, but it's so insidious now. It's on our mobile phone that we're on all the time. We can't escape the chance to buy something at any second. They're living to work. They don't have anything left to even enjoy their life.
So at 24, you've managed to save and invest £100,000. What was your first entry point into the world of investing and saving?
So I didn't grow up with a ton of financial literacy. I think when people first come across my content, they think that I went to private school, that I'm extremely wealthy, but that wasn't the case. Of course, I grew up with privilege, I grew up middle class, but I didn't grow up with a ton of financial literacy where I learned about budgeting, investing, anything like that. It was kind of self-education, and the turning point of when I got exposed to it was at university. I had two guy friends. They were showing me their investment portfolios. From that moment, I thought, this is really cool. I want to learn more about this. Like, I didn't know what a stocks and shares ISA was. And I just wanted to see, like, thousands of pounds in my investments. That just seemed like a secret boys club that I wanted to be a part of. And so that first kick-started it. And then I went down a deep rabbit hole on YouTube, reading books, like just diving into the topic out of curiosity. And then it just turned into an obsession.
You also built a whole brand around living a luxury life on a budget, and I really love your view on wealth, because I think you have a very different view where you're not really into excessive spending and spending quite recklessly. You are kind of more about being smarter with your money. How did you balance still living a good life and being able to enjoy your 20s while also investing and saving?
Yeah, so when I started sharing my personal finance journey publicly, I feel like I wasn't so much aware of the situation that I was in. Like, obviously, I was very privileged to be living at home when I started making content, but I didn't really know that I was on a lower income because I wasn't paying out rent. So
I
I was
understand.
I was on a graduate salary, and like obviously budgeting carefully, but I didn't really realize that my frugal habits probably came as a result of that. Like, not really realizing what it would be like to be a higher earner because I hadn't earned that yet. So I was
Yeah.
very like limited in my view on money. But I feel like now, as I've progressed and I started, to make more from my side hustle, which, didn't really start out as a side hustle, it was more of a hobby. But as I started to make more from content, my spending habits haven't really changed. But I think that frugality at the start built the framework for this philosophy that I now have. And basically, the frugal chic philosophy is to live luxuriously while spending intentionally. And it's all about creating values and creating like a value system where you have things that you love to splurge on, but other things that you just don't enjoy spending money on. So you're just going to completely cut those out. And I think it's important to have those values, because when you don't, you're sucked into so many different things.
Yeah.
You end up just not knowing where your money is going.
Yeah,
I
so true.
think, and a lot of rich people are still frugal, and I think frugal has like such a bad connotation.
Yeah.
You think of people penny pinching, trying to save 7p on their milk. Like, that is extreme frugality. I think that frugality as a concept in general is actually quite a positive thing, because not only is it better for the environment to not be consuming as much consumer goods, but also it's good for people's like mental health. If you have less, you appreciate more, and you might spend more on experiences, or you might spend more on immaterial things.
Yeah.
So I think that's the whole philosophy, is to try and lean into like improving yourself, like by engaging in intellectualism, by reading, instead of just trying to chase like, that consumerist lifestyle.
Yeah. Do you think we're living in an era of overconsumption?
Yeah, definitely. But I almost feel for people, because obviously we all have control of what we buy, but it's so insidious now. It's on our mobile phone that we're on all the time. We can't escape the chance to buy something at any second. You can literally go and order, and you can go and order something and have it delivered to you on the same day. And
so true. Yeah, it's
yeah,
really changed things, right? It's made it a thing where I think we've romanticized overconsumption. You see a lot of things where people are like, look at my Amazon basket, and I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that, but it's like we are kind of romanticizing this idea of like buying more, and whereas you are big on like cutting back, are there any particular things that you've cut back on to add more money into your investment portfolio and your savings?
yeah. So I would say that my spending habits aren't that much on the extreme side, but I would say that I am more cautious than other people. So I, for example, don't often get my nails done. I'll get them done for a birthday or for a holiday or something, but maybe like twice a year. I'll get my hair cut like once a year. Like my beauty maintenance very low. And then I don't, like with groceries, for example, I don't tend to buy a lot of snacks or just extra things. I tend to make things that are meals and I cook them at home. And I obviously will go out for meals, but it will be like for a special occasion or, you know, as an experience with someone else. I love a solo date, but you get what I mean. I don't just go and get a takeaway because it's more convenient. I'd actually rather make something at home where I know what goes into it and it's cheaper and it's healthier.
Yeah.
So I think that my habits aren't that extreme, but maybe in the realms of overconsumption, they could be seen as extreme.
Yeah, I really love it. I think it's an example of being disciplined, because instead of what do you do in those moments where you're like, I kind of want to take away, or like if you've had a long day at work, do you kind of just focus on what the goal is and you're like, hey, I'm not going to give in to buying a takeaway. I'll rather just cook my dinner.
This is the thing. I think when people hear my content or what I don't spend money on, they think that my day-to-day life is like, oh, I can't buy that. But it's really not the case. It's not even something I think about. It's not like the way that I live isn't like me depriving myself of anything because I don't want it anyway. For example, like if you were like a full-on gym girl, like trying to build muscle, you would not be craving McDonald's because you have a different goal. So like I'm kind of the same where I know what my goals are, things that I value, which is like fresh, whole foods, cooked at home. Like there's things that I like. So I don't even have like the Deliveroo app. So it's not a temptation if I don't want it in the first place.
And I also love that you mentioned about the beauty maintenance, because that's a real thing. I think sometimes we as girls, we get really sucked into this beauty maintenance where we have to keep up with our nails, keep up with our hair, and we're actually spending excessively. And how have you managed to maintain a beauty maintenance that works well with your finances?
Yeah, I mean, when you go on social media, you see people spending like £4,000 monthly maintenance, and it's just not realistic. Even that trend being high maintenance to be low maintenance is unrealistic for a lot of people with, you know, UK salaries. Like, I don't understand how people get their lashes. Like, you know, obviously great to do that, but then, you know, if someone was watching that and they couldn't afford to do that, it doesn't feel very like inclusive in a way. For example, if I had a problem like acne, then I'd have to spend more money to get rid of that. So it's not a level playing field. Like I can't go and say to people, oh, well, you don't have to spend money on your appearance, because people do these things for different reasons. So I acknowledge that there's a level of privilege there. But I think for me, if I can limit those costs, and like I will happily just wait for my hair to look bad before I get a haircut. Yeah, I just don't feel the need to buy a lot of makeup products just because there's a new line out.
Do you think it's a case of like knowing what is important to you? So for example, you may not spend as much money on like maintenance, but you would spend a lot of money on maybe other things. And do you think it's about kind of like managing your finances, about knowing this is important to me, but I'm going to have to probably let go of something else in order to prioritize this?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm happy to splurge on experiences, going out with friends, like making memories, or knowledge, improving my skills. But with things that I think are perhaps more superficial, I don't enjoy spending money on them. Like I don't really love spending a lot on skincare and makeup, because I think if I have one face cleanser that lasts me 2 months, I don't need 3. I think that's why I created Frugal Chic, because I want it to be inclusive to a lot of different people. Like you don't have to not spend on beauty. If you love spending on beauty, then if that's your thing, then spend money on it. It's kind of like working out what you value and what you don't value and making that distinction. For example, I love to spend on experiences, going out with friends, or investing in my knowledge, but I don't love to spend on superficial things, especially like makeup and fashion, because I think that, you know, if you have a signature thing and you just use the same products, that works. But say, for example, you were someone else and that part of your job was your appearance, then it totally makes sense to invest in that area, or if you just love it. So I think that the Frugal Chic philosophy is all about working out what you love and what you don't love, and it's going to look different for everyone.
I know that you have like this big goal, and I don't know if that's still your big goal, but you have this big goal to actually retire at 40. And to a lot of people, that probably sounds like very impossible, but you've actually calculated down to the penny what you will need to retire at 40.
Yeah.
Are you still on track to meet that goal, and what are you doing to get there?
Yeah, so I'll briefly explain what it means for those watching, but basically what I practice is the FIRE movement, and it stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And it may seem extreme to some, but the idea is essentially that you reject the idea that retirement is about an age, but more so that it's about a number, like the number that you have in your savings and investments will allow you to retire at a certain age. And I mean, that's not even an opinion, that's actually a fact, that our state pension, for example, is based on numbers and how much we can afford to invest on. So the FIRE movement is basically people taking control of their financial future and deciding that they want to retire early. And when people think about retirement, they often think of doing nothing, like being old and doing nothing all day and being bored. But that's not necessarily what I see it as. There's different kinds of the FIRE movement. There's coast FIRE, which is you reach a certain point in your savings and investments and then you don't invest anymore, but that number takes you through compound interest to your number at a certain age. Or you have things like barista FIRE, which is something that I practice, which is where you know that you have to have a certain amount to basically cover your essentials, but you're not planning to just live off that one pot of money. You might also be working part-time as a barista, or as an example, like, you know, you might be an artist, or you might be doing something that doesn't earn you a lot of money, that's a passion project, and it allows you to do that thing because you have a financial safety net. And so my FIRE number is 1.25 million, and that's the amount that I need to have to give me a 50k salary passively. Because I worked out the numbers and I knew that I had to save and invest £2,000 a month, that's why I kept going with my side hustle, because I was doing my full-time job and doing that, and it was roughly allowing me to do that while I was renting. But I understand that trying to achieve the FIRE movement for a lot of people on a 9-to-5 and renting isn't very feasible. But the only thing that I would say is if you are interested in it and you're determined, then you can find ways like having a side hustle or doing something else that allows you to have extra income to invest. But whether I want to still achieve the goal, essentially my circumstances have changed very rapidly. In the last few months, my situation at work changed a little bit. I was quite unhappy and I decided to make the decision to leave, but this actually directly coincided with me doing really well with content. I started to get better brand deals, started to even advocate more for myself and be able to charge a bit more because I understood how it worked. Therefore, it's meant that I was able to go self-employed, and when you're self-employed, you obviously have a lot more time freedom. I essentially now as a content creator have total time, location and financial freedom. So in a sense, I have already achieved what I was craving. I was craving this sense of being able to do whatever I wanted, basically autonomy. But now that as a self-employed person, I already feel that I have that a little bit. But with the FIRE movement, you're aiming to get to this wild number, which is 1 million. But because I'm a very ambitious, dedicated person, I really hope that I can achieve it.
Do you think the average person can actually retire at 40, or do you think you have to have a certain mindset and a way of living to make that a reality?
I think it's down to circumstances. For example, when you look at my past or how I got to my savings journey, a lot of it was spent living at home, which isn't feasible for a lot of people, and it's a massive privilege. So I think that it may not be doable for every single person. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. But I think if one was on an average salary and they maybe were determined and they increased their income through negotiating a pay rise, taking on a side hustle or building a business outside, I don't see why they couldn't achieve it if they really wanted to. But I think that to say that anyone could do it would be problematic because we all have different privileges and circumstances.
Yeah. One thing I really love about you is that you're not just so focused on money, you're actually focused on other things. And one of the big things that you're focused on is optimizing your brain power. And you're doing quite a lot of things to enhance your brain power and actually help you to understand the psychology of money. I want to understand, what are some things or habits that you have put in place that is helping you be smarter, more confident, and more disciplined?
Yeah, so I actually made a video about this recently where I talked about 5 habits that I started doing that have really improved my life. The first one is writing 1,000 words a day. I know this sounds like very unrealistic or ambitious, so when I delve into this in my YouTube or newsletter, I said to people that, start smaller. You could start with 300 words or 500 words, but a daily writing habit is so key in leveling up your brain power, because we often think that writing is something that we don't visit after school. We often think that it's only for authors or, journalists, but everyday people can write about their feelings and their thoughts and values, and that's really important. And I think that by writing, you consolidate your opinions, for one. You also strengthen your brain power because you're researching, you're synthesizing ideas, putting together different opinions and formulating a new one. So aside from the writing habit, there are some other things that have helped me, like walking 10,000 steps a day, which again can seem quite ambitious or unrealistic. But I think if you're really dedicated to it, if you look at the average person's screen time, they spend a lot of time looking at their phone.
Yeah.
You could swap that out for a hobby or a habit that is way more productive and useful for you. I think walking is so beneficial for a person. There was this brain scan that I saw of the difference between your brain when you're stationary and walking, and it's just so different. Like, it lights up different areas of your brain. It really helps you to think. Walking is one of the things that actually gives me the inspiration to write things, because it allows me to reflect. And I actually think that a lot of our life's problems can be solved by going for a walk. We often think we often think that walking is just something that OAPs do, but we should all be walking. It's so healthy. And the way that I try and get 10,000 steps in is by not doing it all at once, by like breaking it into chunks. So when I was doing my commute, it would be a couple thousand in the morning. Then I'd go for my lunch break and walk then. And then after work, I would walk. So that's kind of how I managed it. But I know it could be a lot for someone with a busier life. I really feel that sleep, your diet, all of these things affect the work that you put out and your ability to make money and all of these different things.
Because I think in the past, finances were something that were kind of kept a secret for a certain group of people. And even if you try to understand it, all you will hear is like financial jargon that you wouldn't understand. But now that information is so accessible, would you say that has played a big part in helping you as well?
Definitely. I think social media has completely democratized like financial education, which I think is brilliant. And even 10 years ago, or when I grew up or came of age, these things weren't really available. Like, there were finance YouTubers which I knew about and watched, but there wasn't like, a relatable TikToker that was sharing their personal finance journey. Like, that's a fairly new thing. And I get even people commenting saying like, where were you when I was 20 or something? But TikTok didn't exist then. So I think we are so lucky. And I'm not saying like, whoa, I'm so amazing, find my channel, but just content creators in general on TikTok or stuff. It is really cool that young people of 18 years old or something can find out how to open up a stocks and shares ISA easily, because like you said, it was a very gate-kept area. And even just talking to my friends that work in finance, they say that even now, like if they ask their colleagues about like financial concepts, they're just kind of shut down, or like, it's almost seen like as a way to keep people in their place, to not know about these things. And I think that the most empowering thing that people can do, especially young women, is to learn about these things and to just take actions to improve their future using social media.
Interesting. In the beginning of this interview, you mentioned that financing and investing was like a boys' game, and I feel like you're one of a few women that I know that are actively like leading this space. Would you say that a lot of women are opening their eyes to understanding finances, or do you still think we have a long way to go?
I think it's an interesting political landscape we're going through, especially on social media. There's a lot of like trad wife content. There's a lot of like traditional values coming out. And I think that even some women are leaning into it in feeling that it's progressive, like, not just using your boyfriend's credit card, or, not just using your husband's bank account, like, and okay, making making like memes or jokes about how your boyfriend's talking about stocks and you're just there sitting at the table.
I'm just a girl,
Yeah, like I think those things, they may be relatable and they may make people feel seen, but whether that's a good thing, I'm not sure, because I think that, like, yes, it's great to have a partner that supports you, but you have to have your own finances first. And I think that more women are coming into the idea that they should be investing, but there's definitely a lot of barriers to entry. And I think that's why it's so great that companies like Female Invest exist, because yes, like you can make an app helping beginners invest, but if you call it Female Invest, then women feel that it's for them, you know?
Yeah. And I just want to ask you, so a lot of people talk about investing. We hear about it a lot online, but I actually want you to break it down. If am new to investing and I don't understand where to start or how to even like make the right investment, where do we begin when it comes to investing?
Yeah, so actually there's very clear steps that anyone can follow. The first step would be to assess your financial situation. Can you actually afford to invest? Because when you invest, your capital is at risk, but that doesn't necessarily mean that tomorrow you're going to lose all the money. It depends on what you're investing in, but you just have to understand that it's not the same as putting your money in the savings account that has a guaranteed return, because the returns aren't guaranteed. You can't be investing any money that you might need for the next 5 years or so. So you kind of have to see it as a long-term thing, which is something that a lot of people struggle with because they are so used to instant gratification that they can't see the long-term vision. But first, working out if you can afford to invest is really important. You can use budgeting rules like the 50-30-20 or zero-based budgeting to work out how much you can afford to set aside. But I would say if you can't afford to invest, then it would be better to wait. So just following on from what I said, so after that, you can make sure you've got an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses and you've paid off any consumer debt, because those two things are super important. Then you can consider opening a brokerage account. A broker is just a middleman between you and the stock market. And there's so many different platforms, Trading 212, Vanguard, eToro, just to name a few. But it's not so much about finding the perfect platform. It's really just about picking one, seeing if it works for you with the fees and what it offers, and going with that and not trying to check out all of the different ones. You really just need one platform. You want to open up a stocks and shares ISA. This is super important because a lot of people just open a general investment account without realizing it. Some trading platforms will call it just an invest account, and that can be confusing. So just make sure that you're using a stocks and shares ISA. And then, because you've understood how much you can afford to set aside, set up an automatic transfer or an auto invest option on the day that you get paid. And this way it will actually rack up quite quickly because you're doing it unconsciously. And you want to obviously pick what you're investing in. So when people first think about investing, they think of individual stocks or companies that they already use, or those hype tech stocks. But actually a lot of beginners are better off thinking about things like index funds or ETFs, which stands for exchange traded funds. These are essentially instruments that track a certain index, or rather list of companies. So it could be the top 500 companies in the US, like the S&P 500, or the top 3,000 companies in the world, like the FTSE All World. So it depends on whether you think that the growth and steadiness of the US will continue, or whether you want to diversify geographically.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about investing like it's a get-rich-quick scheme, but you have to actually put your money in. And how long does it take until you actually see like your money like accelerating and growing?
That's the thing. I think that a lot of people think that investing is going to make them rich quickly, but ironically, no, it's actually going to make you rich slowly. The things that will make you rich quickly are business or immediate things that give you cash flow. But investing, you have to have a lot of money invested to generate like a income from it. So like when I talk about the FIRE movement, my FIRE number is 1.25 million. I'm not going to reach that by, in a few years. That's going to take like 20 years. So it's definitely not a get rich quick scheme. There are people that, trade more frequently. And actually, I think that's a perfectly fine thing to do if you have the qualifications or you know what you're doing. But most retail investors don't. So I think that investing is definitely not going to make you rich quickly.
Yeah.
Other things might, like a business.
Yeah, that's true. So if I now get a paycheck, right, and I'm like, hey, just got paid for my work, what proportion of it should I be saving and what proportion of it should I be investing?
Say you're on the average graduate salary of £30,000 and you used the 50-30-20 budgeting rule, you'd have 50% to your needs, which would be £1,000 because roughly after tax, and then £600 for wants, £400 for future. So when you think about that future category, it can include savings and investments, but you kind of want to go in the order of sorting out your emergency fund first, and then short-term savings like holidays, and then think about investing. Because if you went straight to investing and you didn't think about the other steps, then, you know, what if your car breaks down? You need to pay for a new tire. You'd have to sell your investments. And what if the market's in a downturn? You could potentially lose money then.
Yeah.
So it's better to almost think about it in those steps where it comes last. But if you're like me and you're more of an aggressive saver and investor, then you can obviously do it at your own caution. Like I invested before I had an emergency fund, but it wasn't as necessary for me because, you know, I was either at uni or living at home. So it depends on your situation.
Yeah. So on your journey to investing, what are some of the things that you've had to unlearn, and what are some of the things that you've kind of said, I'm keeping this knowledge with me? Because it's a journey, right? At first you make mistakes. So what are some of the things that you had to just completely stop doing?
I would say that I never had any like bad money beliefs, but I did have an idea that wanting money was greedy or evil. But actually, when I learned more about like the cost of living or like how much you actually need to live a good life, I realized that what I was craving wasn't, you know, a greedy level of riches. It was actually just financial stability. So there's actually nothing wrong with the pursuit of money. Money is not inherently evil. It's a tool or exchange of value. And that's something that I kind of had to unlearn, is not feeling guilty for wanting to improve my financial situation. There are a handful of people that I'd say that I've encountered or just come across that they're actually on good salaries, but they don't have any savings because of their spending habits. And that's not coming from a place of judgment, because I have been an overspender myself and I've seen the effects of, you know, how easy it is to overspend. But, you know, there's people on really high salaries that still have a lot of credit card debt, that still live paycheck to paycheck. So I think that a higher salary can solve your problems, but it may not solve them if you already have like pre-existing like money problems. So I think that, you know, there are a handful of people that are just surviving, not out of choice, but because they're in that circumstance. But there's also a handful of people that aren't really making the most of their salary or because of their spending habits. But that is controversial to say.
Yeah. Do you think that a lot of people believe that the more money you make, the more you have to spend? Whereas I don't know, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I believe you operate from the more money you make, the more cautious you are with your spending. Am I right by saying that?
Yeah. So actually, this is a classic example. Like when I first started working, I was on the classic graduate salary. And then as I started my side hustle, I started to make a bit of money here and there, nothing to like write home about. But then it's in the last few months where I'd say that it's in the last few months where I earned my first ever 5-figure month, which to a lot of people would just be life-changing money. And they might, you know, go on a really fancy holiday or think, finally, I'll buy that designer bag. And while I had those thoughts briefly and I was thinking, you know, this is such an achievement, I should do something, actually, there was nothing that I wanted more than my freedom. And there was nothing no material thing that I actually wanted more than to put that towards my investments. And I know that sounds really sad, and a lot of people just can't understand me.
I don't think so, but yeah, I do understand. I think because a lot of people, as you said, they don't focus on the long-term goal, where I feel like you're focused on delayed gratification, right?
Yeah, and it's not a sense of like, as I mentioned before, depriving myself. It's more that I understand that my future self also deserves a rich life. So I'm going to enjoy my life how I want to in the present, but also like I know that just buying more and consuming more will not make me happier. You know, I've been an overspender, so I've bought loads of clothes and just had loads of stuff. That didn't make me happy. And just doing more, having more doesn't always equate to more happiness. There's a certain threshold, and actually there's this thing called hedonic adaptation, where we get a new iPhone, for example, and within a few days we're used to it. You go on holiday, it becomes your norm. You know, after a week, you just feel normal. And I think that that's why I don't buy a lot of material things, because I know that my brain will just get bored of them after a week.
Yeah, it's
so there's
true.
no point.
Yeah.
There are some things that, even like low cost things, that can actually have a long-term lasting impact on your happiness, but a lot of things just won't. So I try to make that judgment. But I think that, yeah, as I've become a higher earner, my spending habits haven't changed because I still have the same goals. It's just made them easier to get there.
What's your opinion on people spending thousands of pounds on designer bags and clothes? Is that something that you necessarily agree with? I know it's quite controversial, but I just want to ask for your opinion.
So after working in luxury fashion for 2 years, I've seen firsthand that retail prices are just based on vibes. Like, genuinely. Like, I genuinely think that a lot of designer brands or luxury brands are designed that way, and their price point is designed that way to encourage a certain type of consumer to be part of a group or to buy into an idea, not for the product itself. Now, I love fashion. I've grown up with fashion, like, it's my thing, but I can see in broad daylight that whether something is worth buying or not.
So I'm going to fire some quick finance questions at you, and I really want you to answer in like your best case scenario. So what you would do in if you were navigating these circumstances, or like any advice that you have for anyone who's currently dealing with these issues. So my first question I want to ask you is, if someone only has 50 or £100 to start investing with, what should they do?
So without giving financial advice, if they have an emergency fund set up, they don't have any consumer debt, they could consider opening up a stocks and shares ISA where they can invest in stocks and shares tax-free. And they could pick something like a global index fund and choose to invest it in that, because historically the total stock market has had average annual returns of 10% or 8% when you account for inflation. It's not a foolproof guaranteed way, but it's had those historical returns, so one could make that decision for themselves.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And what's the most overrated piece of money advice you've ever heard?
Don't have a side hustle, focus on your main hustle.
Oh, really? Can you expand on that? Why do you think it's overrated?
Because if I didn't start my side hustle, I never would have gone self-employed or started my own business. And I think that it's silly to just rely on one source of income. Most millionaires have 7+ sources of income. And I think that, yeah, you can grind in your main job and you can level up and increase your earning potential. But at the end of the day, you're still dispensable and you're still a number. And that to me is scary. I never want an institution or a person to feel like they own me. So I always want to have options.
Very interesting. What app, tool, or system has made the biggest difference to your finances?
Sorry. Probably the investing app that I use, Trading 212.
Okay.
It's like the most accessible, free to use app, and it just makes investing so much easier. I love the interface and it's really simple to use.
What's one money habit everyone should start today?
Paying yourself first. It is so important. Even if it's a smaller amount, it's the intention that you are treating yourself with priority and you're prioritizing your future.
And do you think it's better to focus on saving or investing more, if you had to pick one?
If I had to pick one, it would be investing. But of course, you have to have savings to be able to invest.
And lastly, what's one thing you wish schools had taught you, and what is one thing that you wish they were teaching young people about money?
How to invest in the stock market. I feel like it's not talked about enough, and it's really simple, actually, when you break it down.